Welcome to our explainer. Today, we're exploring a moment in time that, honestly, holds this profound, timeless meaning for every single one of us. We're going to unpack the ancient, foundational wisdom found in Chapter 1, verse 28 of the Bhagavad Gita.
But before we really get into today's reflection, I just want to invite you to take a deep breath and just be present with me for a moment. We're about to explore a sacred text that has guided millions through the absolute complexities of life. And fascinatingly, it all begins with a moment of profound, paralyzing vulnerability. Let's listen to the sacred words of the Bhagavad Gita. Drishtvayamam swajanam Krishna yuyutsum samupasthitam siddhanti mama gatrani muhamcha parishusyati. Take just a moment to let the resonance of those ancient words settle.
In English, this verse translates to, "O Krishna, seeing my own relatives gathered here, ready to fight. My limbs grow weak, my mouth becomes dry, my body trembles, and my hair stands on end." Now, at first glance, reading those words, they might just sound like the natural, entirely human reaction of a warrior standing on the edge of a massive, terrifying battle. But this specific verse, it's a massive turning point. It's a pivot not just in the epic story of the Mahabharata, but in the spiritual journey of every human being.
So let's dive into this. Up until this exact moment, Arjuna had arrived overflowing with confidence. He was one of the greatest archers of his entire era. Fearless, absolutely determined to fight for justice. But everything changed the second he actually looked closely at the armies gathered before him. He didn't see a faceless enemy anymore. He saw his grandfather, Bhishma, the very man who had raised him with so much love. He saw his revered teacher, Dronacharya, the man who had literally taught him the art of archery he was about to use against him. He saw cousins, uncles, friends. These were the people who had been the fundamental fabric of his life since childhood.
In that single, shattering moment, the battlefield was no longer just some physical place of war. It totally transformed. It became a place where love, duty, compassion, and incredibly heavy responsibility all violently collided at once. The sheer weight of what he was about to do just crashed down on him.
And notice how his body reacted before his mind could even begin to process the immense grief he was feeling. His hands literally lost their strength, his mouth went completely dry, his whole body trembled. These aren't just poetic flourishes meant to make a good story. They're a perfectly accurate, almost clinical documentation of human trauma and overwhelming stress.
Which brilliantly builds a bridge right from the ancient world straight into our lives today. Because even now, when we experience intense fear, sudden grief, or deep emotional conflict, our bodies respond in the exact same ways. Think about it. Have you ever had to initiate a really difficult conversation and felt your heart just racing? Have your hands ever shaken before making a life-altering choice? Has your voice ever gotten unsteady when confronting someone you deeply care about? The physical response to an emotional crossroads hasn't changed a bit in thousands of years.
The Bhagavad Gita is beautifully reminding us of a core truth here. Even the absolute strongest individuals are not immune to moments of intense emotional vulnerability. Arjuna was the greatest warrior of his time, and yet he broke down. There is absolutely no weakness in feeling overwhelmed. The fear itself is not a failure. The real question, the one that actually defines our path, is what we choose to do after those emotions hit us.
Because on a deeper, more philosophical level, Arjuna's struggle isn't just about fighting a physical war. It's about that universal conflict between attachment and duty. We all experience these battles, don't we? Sometimes we know exactly what the right thing to do is, but our emotions completely hold us hostage. We hesitate because the decisions involve the people we love. We avoid uncomfortable conversations. We delay necessary actions. We struggle deeply whenever our hearts and our responsibilities seem to be pulling us in entirely different directions.
And that brings us to the dual meaning of Kurukshetra. Yes, it was a historical physical battlefield in ancient India. But much more importantly for us, it represents the internal battlefield within the human mind. This is the Kurukshetra that exists inside every single one of us. The battlefield is not always outside. More often than not, the absolute most intense wars we fight are right there, within our own minds and hearts. This gives us such a profound reframing of what it actually means to be brave. This verse teaches us that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. If the greatest warrior experienced fear, well then fear is perfectly natural. True courage is the willingness to seek wisdom before making an important decision. It's having the bravery to stop right in the middle of the chaos and admit that you don't have all the answers.
Instead of putting up a front, instead of hiding his overwhelming emotions behind some mask of toxic stoicism, Arjuna just openly shares his feelings with Lord Krishna. He admits he is completely lost. And that honesty, that sheer, raw vulnerability, is actually the beginning of his transformation. Sometimes the single most powerful step we can take in our own lives is to just admit that we're confused and actively ask for guidance.
So this ancient text is actually handing us a highly practical framework for our own lives. When life places us in our own personal Kurukshetras, emotionally difficult situations, we shouldn't ignore our feelings or push them down. First, we have to acknowledge them with total honesty, exactly like Arjuna did. Second, we pause to reflect with wisdom, seeking out guidance from a trusted mentor, a secret text, or our own highest self. And finally, we allow truth, not fear, and definitely not blind attachment, to guide our final decisions.
The crucial takeaway here is this: our emotional struggles are never, ever signs of failure. When your hands shake and your mouth goes dry in the face of a heavy decision, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human, and you're just standing at a crossroads. These moments of profound struggle, they're very often the doorway to greater understanding and real spiritual growth.
And honestly, this is just the beginning. In the very next verse, Arjuna describes even more of the physical and emotional turmoil he's experiencing. He reveals just how intensely this inner conflict has shaken his entire being. As we continue this journey through our explainer series on the Bhagavad Gita, we're going to see exactly how these agonizing moments of confusion literally become the foundation for one of the greatest spiritual conversations ever recorded in human history.
But until we explore that next verse, I want to leave you with this final thought. As you face your own inner battles today, your own Kurukshetra, will you find the courage to let truth rather than fear guide your next step? Take a breath. Let that sit with you for a moment. May we all find the wisdom to face our internal battles with courage, compassion, and absolute clarity. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.